Another edition of the On the Mic podcast, and very, very honored and happy to be welcoming my guest today. He's a man who I have a lot of respect for. He has been inside combat sports in a multitude of ways. He's the one and only. You will hear him this weekend on Friday with the PFL Challenger Series, starting off first time ever. Sean O'Connell at Real OC Sports on Twitter. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. So you and I have always crossed paths, but I've always been like 30 seconds too late. You were working at Sirius XM. I started working at Sirius XM when you started taking on a bigger role at PFL. We were actually in the same studio as Sirius XM, and you were on your way out as I was on my way in for a shift. And it just seems like I've always been right there, but I've never had an opportunity to talk to you. So I'm super excited to talk to you today. You've done it all, honestly. You've done it all in your career as a fighter and as a commentator. And just want to start off with this first and foremost, before I have you like kind of look back on all the things that you've been involved with. When you were fighting actively, was there ever a thought process in your mind that you wanted to get into commentating? And was it because of things that you were hearing on broadcast, or what led you into the world of broadcasting?
No, so that's my day job. It's been, I've been a sports talk radio guy for a long time. And I thought as I was, fighting that it would be a natural sort of transition for me to not only fight, but work the desk. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm back.
Okay. But yeah, so that's the broadcasting stuff. Broadcasting is like my day job, right? I work as a sports talk radio host. I did that locally in Salt Lake, and then San Francisco, and then back in Salt Lake before I ever started working for Sirius XM. And so, as I was fighting, my day job was to be a sports talk radio guy. And so I had broadcasting experience, I had fighting experience. There's very few people in the world who have both. So I was like, this is a natural fit for me to broadcast about fights, obviously, or broadcast during fights. When I was with like the UFC, they weren't interested in having me do that because I wasn't really a big name yet. And the PFL at first wasn't really interested in me doing that either until I convinced them, like, look, you just got to let me try this. And then it worked out nicely. So I always had my eye on doing this. It took me until my career was almost over to realize I needed to focus on the play-by-play side rather than being an analyst, because there was always going to be a more famous name that would get first dibs at an analyst role. But nobody, like literally nobody, can be a play-by-play person with fight experience. Like there's nobody out there who does that. So I decided that would be the niche I tried to fill, and it worked out.
I hate to echo or grab or copycat somebody's comments, but Ariel Helwani gave you a lot of respect recently for that very reason, because you are the first, former fighter turned play-by-play guy. And as someone who's a sports talk radio host, I've worked in sports talk radio before transitioning into combat sports. I kind of get it, especially because there's such a different aspect to covering this than, say, last weekend's Super Bowl between the Bengals and Rams. Like we're not talking to Matthew Stafford about why he had to quit his third job, to focus on football. Like we have to ask a lot of fighters. But when you're looking at getting into the play-by-play, and like you said, it was a niche that no other fighter was doing. What was the most difficult part of taking on a play-by-play role?
So on cameras are the hard thing for me, right? Because like you start the broadcast being on camera, you do stand-ups throughout, some of the interviews are, and like I didn't have a lot of experience in the TV side of things, right? Ton of experience interviewing people on radio, but it's just not the same. And it's a lot tighter on television, and especially when you're at the top of a show and you got to get into the action, but you got to find a way, introduce, your analysts and talk about the main storylines going into the night and all that kind of stuff. It's got to be tight, but it's got to be energetic and compelling. And to cram all the necessary elements in was difficult for me at first. Like it was not smooth at all, and it's probably still not all that smooth. I think that's the area that I still need to get a lot better. But yeah, that was the toughest thing, because It's not like radio. Like there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of crossover in broadcasting, but that's not it. When you screw up on radio, you have all the time in the world to backtrack, to correct yourself, to excuse me, what I meant to say was you can't do that on TV, especially not at the top of a show.
Yeah, trust me. I thought going from like doing like a online or an actual radio show into podcasting was difficult. I can't even imagine the transition from sports talk radio into play-by-play commentating. But we are here to talk about PFL and the Challenger Series. It is 8 straight weeks on Fubo Sports Network, and it starts this week. And the headliner, Josh Silveira, son of a well-recognized coach out of American Top Team, Conan Silveira. Josh Silveira, two-division LFA world champion. But before we just talk about this Friday, I mean, the work that you guys are doing overall in the PFL, with the ESPN deal, now the Fubo Sports Network, the Challenger Series. I mean, it was just a few years ago we were seeing the birth of PFL. How do you describe just the leaps and bounds this company and this promotion has made since, you got started with them?
Yeah, it's exciting because I wouldn't know. I mean, there's a lot of people in the sports world who think that I could do Dana White's job and I could do it better. I could do, Ray Seffo's job and do it better. I could do Don Davis and Pete Murray's job. And our bosses, right? Our owners, CEOs, like the folks running this company have done a really incredible job of kind of hitting all the marks, mostly right. There's growing pains and there's failures and mistakes. If you pay attention to any startup company, there's issues along the way. These guys have been part of ground floor building of major businesses, not even in the sports world, right? Major corporations in their past. They are incredible businessmen. And because they probably in previous, iterations of their entrepreneurial life, they made some of those mistakes. They're not making them with the PFL. And it's really cool. I mean, for us to go in 2 years, because it was 2 years to go from being a brand new startup to being on ESPN, and now to have another better ESPN deal. Like, it's just outrageous the progress that they've made so quickly. The audience doubled from the first year to the second year, from the second year to the third year, heading into year number 4. I hope that it doubles again and that exponential growth continues. You got, at first you were signing Sean O'Connell to be in the PFL. And then you got Anthony Pettis and Rory McDonald and Fabricio Verdum and Kayla Harrison, obviously, is a home-built brand, and Ray Cooper is a home-built brand. Like, it's really incredible what they're doing. Way, way, way better business acumen than I think most of the MMA world is familiar with. And that's why we're making such rapid progress.
And it's honestly, it's a joy to see, because I think every PFL show brings something new to it every single time. You know what you're going to get for these other promotions every Friday or every Saturday. You really don't know what's next. And I think the season tournament has something to do with that. I think the names or the lack of knowledge from fans, not knowing everybody, kind of has something to do with that, because you may think that one fight is set in its way because you've looked at it on paper. But once they're inside the cage in the PFL, we've seen plenty of stars born when people thought they weren't going to be stars. And that's one thing I love about the PFL. And we're going to talk about the times that you were signed. You were the PFL 2018 World Light Heavyweight champion in the tournament there. What was that like for you? And how do you think that, obviously you had a lot of fight experience, right? You've been through it all. You've been with other promotions. But how was being a part of the PFL format helped you in your broadcasting side of it as well?
I mean, it was just, experiencing it on both sides helps me tell the story better now that I'm a broadcaster, right? Because I know what it's like to win a fight and you got to do it again 6 weeks later, to lose a fight and come back and win, to keep your hopes alive for a championship 6 weeks later. Like, I know what that's like for these individuals. And it's, and also I grew up playing traditional sports, right? I played college football, and like that marriage of the MMA world to the season format is really kind of a familiar and comfortable thing, not only for some of the athletes, but I think for fans as well, because we just watched the Super Bowl. Rams won the Super Bowl, right? It was great. They had a bunch of great storylines. Does it feel good for LA? Hopefully they actually have real Rams fans now down there, whatever. But at the end of the day, that's the 2021-2022 season, right? When we start things off next year, nobody gives a damn who won the Super Bowl last year. I mean, they do, but it doesn't put you ahead. It doesn't make you the number one seed in the playoffs. It's something you hit a reset button every single year, which is great, especially if you lost, right? If you're somebody, Magomed Karamov, right? Season 1 champion, season 2 gets injured, season 3 loses to Ray Cooper, and he's like, man, he wants to win another $1 million. He wants to win another championship. Instead of having to fight continuously undefeated for 3 or 4 years in order to get another title shot, you hit that reset button every single year. Brendan Loughnane, I talked to him after the championship last year. He was one of the favorites at 145 pounds. He showed incredible skills throughout the season. Couldn't quite get it done. Lost to the eventual champion, right? Mavleet Haibulayev. And he was like, oh my gosh, man, what's next? And I was like, I'll tell you what's next. You got about 8 months until you could be right back here, because that's the season format. You hit the reset button, you get back to work. Everybody starts with a clean slate the next year. I think that is something that American sports fans, well, worldwide sports fans can really get on board with. And so I think the format, having gone through the format, knowing that like my UFC record, which was not what I wanted it to be, obviously, I started off in the PFL, did not matter. Didn't matter. Winning streak, losing streak, did not matter. Win the regular season fights, qualify for the playoffs, win in the playoffs, make it to a championship, you can go home with $1 million check. There's no other place in mixed martial arts where you can go from 0 to $1 million in 8 months. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
No, it does not. And to kind of segue into, what we're here to talk about today, the Challenger Series. Now we got 8 straight weeks of fighters, and we don't have these major cards, right? There's just a few fights, per card on a lot of these. And with that, it's such a laser focus for fans and media and anyone watching and the fighters themselves. This isn't like these other shows, and I'll just use it because I hate bringing up other promotions when talking about one specific, but this isn't Dana White's Contender Series, right? This is the PFL Challenger Series. What sets apart the Challenger Series, and how excited are you for it?
Well, look, the Contender Series is a great product. It's good. It's proven. It's delivered some stars, just like the Ultimate Fighter did. They know what they're doing over there in the UFC. That's great. How do you differentiate yourself from what's already a really good product? That's where the businessmen at the top of the PFL come in. That's where Don Davis and Pete Murray and George Greenberg and all these guys were like, man, what can we do to make that model even better? And they married a very popular format, reality television, celebrity panelist judges, right, with the sport of mixed martial arts. So that's what we got on Contender Series, or on Challenger Series, excuse me. We've got commission judges who are going to decide who actually wins, right? They're going to judge it on the 10-point must system, totally normal MMA that all fans are familiar with. And then for this first show, we got guys like Ray Lewis and Tyron Woodley and Randy Couture. They're going to be sitting cage side, and they're going to be like, okay, what separates that winner from the other 3 winners tonight? What makes this person more compelling, a better fan product, a better fighter than the other 3, than the other winners, right? So it's kind of like American Idol meets MMA, which those are 2 very popular things in America right now. Talent show TV and mixed martial arts coming together. And of course, I say this again, every other promotion, the way that they scout, like, you got to give respect to the fact that these people are finding talent and they're developing talent. Like, it's not about who's doing it better or whatever. But there's no other place where you can win a fight on Fubo TV, potentially earn your way in to a regular season for the PFL, and in October and November, when our championship is going to be this year, walk away with a $1 million check. It just cannot happen anywhere else. I mean, the UFC has built some big stars. Sean O'Malley, right? Sean O'Malley didn't get a title shot 6 months after his debut on the Contender Series, and he's the biggest star to come out of that show, right? It's just something that's totally unique to the PFL. And I'm really excited to see how it plays out. This is kind of experimental for us, right? Is Ray Lewis going to be a great celebrity judge? Is he going to be the next Simon Cowell for combat sports? Who knows? We'll find out starting on Friday.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to piss off that judge. I know that much. I think one thing that's also really, really cool is that, Fubo TVs, they've got a popular predictive free-to-play games where those who are watching can kind of keep up with, the live action as it's happening. They can go through and they can win prizes. So it brings in another element for fans to stay locked in and not just go, oh, I'll wait and see who they pick afterwards. Like, no, like Fubo TV, Fubo Sports Network, and the PFL and PFL Challenger Series is giving fans a unique, like you said, just a completely unique opportunity, not only for the fighters, but for the fans themselves. And, talent show combined with MMA, you said it best there. I'm going to reach down deep here, and I hope I'm not pulling too hard in the broadcasting question. But how does that, as a play-by-play guy, how does that format now with all this others aspects to the Challenger Series, does that change anything for you on fight night when you're calling the fight, knowing, all right, so I have to call the fight, but I also know there's another side to this, whoever wins?
I think you're going to see a distinct tone, right? It's a little bit lighter, a little bit more of a sort of fun atmosphere for this Challenger Series. At least that's the way I picture it. We'll see how it plays out on Friday night. But I'm going to be reacting to what Ray Lewis says and what Tyron Woodley says, just like everyone else, right? Like, I'm going to call the fight to the best of my ability. We're going to send it to get the official decision. I'm going to talk to the fighters who win. And then we're going to hear from a celebrity panel that might say, that was a win, but actually you stink, or that was the greatest, flying knee knockout that I've ever seen in the history of this sport. And I've been watching it for however long. I'm excited that I get to react to that stuff in the moment too. So I guess that adds a whole new layer, a whole new element as a play-by-play guy. But I think, again, because it's this marriage of sport and reality TV, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. And your main event, Muhammad Juma against Josh Silveira. We got 4 fights, listed on the card here. What are you most excited for come fight night? Is it, Josh Silveira, like I said, a two-way LFA champion, kind of coming with that family lineage, or is there another fighter on the card who jumps out the most to you?
Well, look, I'm excited to see Silveira fight like live, right? I've watched him fight, but I've never been cage side. I've never been the one calling the action. So I'm excited to potentially watch, kind of the emergence of someone who could be a future star in this sport. But that's the expected storyline, right? That's what everyone like, oh yeah, this is the guy who's got the best shot. The PFL, if the PFL has showed us anything in the short existence of this company, it's that the surprise storyline is oftentimes the one that emerges, right? Like, Haush Manfio won a championship and $1 million last year. Bruno Capoloza did the same thing. Ray Cooper III, going back to season 1, Ray Cooper III, people didn't know this cat. You had to be really, really, really into MMA to have awareness of what Ray Cooper III was. Now, he's one of the best welterweights in the world. Period. Point blank. He would give anybody in the welterweight division worldwide a run for their money. I'm talking about every single person, right? And nobody expected that. So will we see Josh Silveira win? Maybe. What about Alexander Popek, this guy out of Germany? It's a lot easier to fly under the radar in the European MMA scene right now than it is in the American MMA scene, right? This guy's like 6'3", shredded. Like, if he was born in the United States of America, he'd be an NFL tight end. But he wasn't. He's a German, right? So, like, that's the kind of stuff that undiscovered talent is really, really fascinating because it's exactly that. It's undiscovered. You didn't know who Conor McGregor was until you knew who Conor McGregor was, right?
Absolutely.
And that when that stuff happens, we get to potentially be on the ground floor of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but just a few more here for you. And I always, appreciate you making the time for me. With that, right? Ray Cooper's a great example. I think everyone knows the biggest example of homegrown talent, with the PFL, and that's the woman who is currently in the free agency world. And you being a sports talk radio guy, you kind of know the ins and outs of how that kind of goes. And that's Kayla Harrison. And what do you think Kayla Harrison has done for her career being with the PFL, rather than what has she done for the PFL? Because I think she's done a lot for her career being in the PFL, because like you said, sometimes it's the unrecognized talent. And yes, this is not taking away anything from Kayla Harrison, but the PFL sets the stage for anyone to beat anyone. And I think, good on Kayla for avoiding that, but now she's the most lucrative combat sports free agent we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah. And you know what? She's earned that. And she's a dominant champion. She was dominant in judo, the most dominant American judoka in the history of the sport in our great country, right? And she's, for my money, one of the most dominant mixed martial artists in any weight class, man or woman in the world. The gap between Kayla Harrison and the closest competition that she has faced, the toughest test that she has faced, is a pretty big gap, right? And because of that, she's highly sought after, and good for her, man. Like, Kayla has worked her ass off to put herself in the position she's in. She, behind the scenes, we told the story. I don't know if we did it justice on last season. She had a family situation that required her to step up to the plate, adopt her niece and nephew, and become their full-time mom. She is a mom now to 2 children after, just being focused on herself and being focused on her own career for so long. And she took that in and still was a champion, still dominated all the competition, right? She's an incredible human being. She's an incredible athlete. Like I said, I think she's, head and shoulders above the competition. And you wouldn't know any of that if it wasn't for the PFL. I love Kayla, but Kayla, 2-time Olympic judo gold medalist, is not a star in the United States of America, right? She had earned those Olympic medals and people still didn't know her name. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for people to debate, but the PFL gave Kayla the stage to become what she has become. She has taken that opportunity, and, she's developed this personality and become one of the most interesting people, in addition to being a great fighter. So my hope is that I'm calling Kayla Harrison fights for her entire career. That's way above my pay grade. I'll let everyone work out the free agency stuff. I've said before, I think that it's mutually beneficial for the PFL and for Kayla to be together. I think that's what's going to happen, but I don't have any special information on it. So I'm waiting to see what the official news is, like everyone else.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I actually fall right in line with you and everything you said there. Just a couple more here, Sean. With you talking about some of the names that have joined the PFL, I'm sure there are going to be more that follows. Now, the Ray Coopers and the Kayla Harrisons, those do one thing for the PFL, but then there's a whole nother avenue that brings a crowd, or a village, if you will, of fans with these other fighters who have fought in other promotions, fought on the biggest stages, fought with the biggest fan bases. And, guys like the Anthony Pettis, Rory McDonald, Fabricio Verdums that you mentioned. How is it beneficial, obviously, for both sides? Obviously, PFL gets a name that most fans know coming right into it. But then obviously the PFL picks up, so much talent. But on the flip side, they also give opportunities for guys like Clay Collard to, have their Cinderella story, maybe not just to beat an Anthony Pettis or whoever it may be, but you have these big names that other fighters, that PFL homegrown talent, will now have an opportunity to defeat and make their own name through.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great opportunity for guys who maybe need a little bit of change of scenery, like Anthony Pettis, like Rory McDonald, like Fabricio Verdum. It's that short timeline, right? You fight 4 or 5 times, you win $1 million. Those guys are all being handsomely compensated for their regular season fights as well. So if they win a championship, They're taking home more than $1 million in the year, right? Like that's a nice living for anybody. So it provides a great opportunity for them to establish themselves not only as a UFC star or a Bellator star or whatever star, a star in the sport of mixed martial arts, right? If you can win in the UFC and you can win in Bellator and you can win in the PFL, nobody can deny that you are just one of the greatest fighters out there, right? If you can take a stop, no one can say, oh, you protected your record, all is about the matchmaking. If you can win in all those places, and especially in this format where it's just a regular season, playoffs, and a championship, it's tournament style, no one can say that you're getting like favorable matchups and things like that. So big opportunity for those guys. But then, like you said, the big thing for us, I think, for me as a broadcaster, it provides a baseline, a litmus test for where fans can set their expectations of what they're getting from the PFL, right? So Rory McDonald is a great example of this. He has been a top 10 welterweight in the world for a decade, right? Always was, still is, comes over to the PFL. Immediately, everyone's just like, oh, Rory McDonald, he's going to go grab himself an easy $1 million. Is that what happened? Rory McDonald had tough fights in the PFL. He got worked by Ray Cooper III, right? I don't know if it was because he underestimated Ray's wrestling. I don't know if he didn't have a great camp, whatever it was. That was not a close fight, right? So what does that do? It shows you that Rory McDonald, who's a competitive top 10 welterweight in every place, in the UFC, that's what he was. In Bellator, that's what he was. He comes to the PFL, and now the guy who beats him, you're like, oh, all right, well, that if Ray Cooper can do that to Rory McDonald, who else can he do that to? And that's where it's valuable for me, because it helps fans who are not necessarily sold on the PFL roster or the PFL format. It helps them to understand that these are world-class men and women that are fighting over here in a different format for a different prize in a brand new startup company. And it is every bit as difficult to win here as it was in the UFC, or it is in Bellator, or any other organization that people feel like they know more about.
Yeah, and I, again, love the PFL format, not just Challenger Series, but the tournament, everything that we talked about today, Sean. And I want to end this on a light note, and then I'll plug everything that you're here for. But two things off MMA, one being something we've mentioned a few times. We're just a few days removed from Super Bowl 56 and the Los Angeles Rams. What did you make of the game?
I mean, it was awesome. It was a great game. It was one of those, a bunch of experienced guys found a way to get the win over maybe the next big thing in the NFL, Joe Burrow, right? I mean, he's part of this crop of young quarterbacks that are the new guard. Tom Brady's done. Aaron Rodgers is on his way out. We already saw guys like Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees that were the previous great generation, right? And now you got these young cats. Joe Burrow took the Cincinnati Bengals to a Super Bowl in his second year in the league, all while being sacked more than any quarterback in the league. Like, give me a break. And what you saw from the Rams was Aaron Donald proved that he's the best defensive player in the world. Von Miller played great, especially through the playoffs. My good buddy Eric Weddle came out of retirement off the couch to help them win a Super Bowl and get his first ring of his career. Just a lot. I mean, it was crazy. And oh man, I'm getting a call here. Can you still see me?
No, I can't, but I think I'll come back there any second. Yeah, there you are.
Okay. So yeah, the Super Bowl was awesome. I know that people like to complain. Were you not entertained? This was every game in these NFL playoffs came down to a final possession, came down to overtime, came down to come from behind victory. And what did we see in the Super Bowl? The same thing. Yep. Joe Burrow took possession with less than 2 minutes, down a score, needed to drive down. And the only reason he wasn't able to is because Aaron Donald, the best defensive player on the planet, beat his man and forced an early throw. If he hadn't done that, we've all seen the angle, right? Jamar Chase was wide open. If you're not satisfied with a game like that, you're not a football fan.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is the best playoffs we've ever seen. A really good Super Bowl. I know I might be crazy, but when the Bengals got the ball back, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is where Joe Burrow begins his legacy for his entire career. I was like, they're getting it. I don't know if they're going to overtime to get it. I
think that defense was going to get a stop because this offensive, like Cincinnati needs to go and draft a bunch of offensive linemen, right?
Yeah.
That was the situation. But I knew the defense was going to get a stop. I had my fingers crossed for that so my buddy could get his ring, and that's what happened.
I mean, I'm in Chicago. You don't have to sell me on offensive line. I know all about.
Yeah, you know.
My last one here, we kind of spoke about it kind of off camera, but a good mutual friend of ours. I didn't get the opportunity to work with you guys side by side at SiriusXM. What is the best Michael Stutz story you have, if you can share it?
The best Michael Stutz story I have is we were post championship last season. We're down at the hotel. They have like a lounge set up with food and drinks for everybody. And me and Stutz end up sitting there talking all night long about football and weirdly about fossils. I've got this obsession. I want a woolly mammoth tusk. And so we were talking about like the black market on how you get those things. And just, he's a great dude. And we talked into the wee hours about a bunch of random stuff. Great person. Huge asset to us here at PFL.
That is amazing. Well, Sean O'Connell, this was everything I had hoped it would be and more. Hope to talk to you again, throughout the PFL year this year. Now I can stop fanboying when you're, 5 feet away from me and inside the SiriusXM studios. It was like my third shift, and I like kind of looked over, and they were like, just let him do his thing. So I was like, all right. But PFL Challenger Series begins this Friday, February 18th on the Fubo Sports Network. It is part of Fubo TV, and get the app, sign up, and get Fubo Sports Network. And it's for the next 8 weeks. You have, as Sean O'Connell said, the best reality talent show combined with the best combat sport in the world, mixed martial arts, and PFL Challenger Series 1 goes down this Friday, February 18th. Sean O'Connell, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.